Thanks, Simon. My background, I'm in charge of innovations at the Carbon Trust. My background's split between telecoms and energy, much of it involved with setting up new businesses. I'm quite good at setting up businesses. I'm crap at running them, which is why I've been pigeonholed in the Carbon Trust to work with lots of other startups and not get too involved in them. So Simon's asked me to give a sort of a term report to the telecoms industry, the mobile part of it, the wireless part of it, how the wireless part is doing in terms of energy and the environment. I've structured this a brief introduction, an overview of what the industry is doing in terms of energy and carbon, and is it enough? And then some examples that we've come across from other places to suggest lessons you might be able to learn. Quick introduction to the Carbon Trust. In case you haven't heard of us, we were set up 13, 14 years ago by the UK government. 3 years ago, the coalition, the Tories, stopped all our funding, so we've become totally independent. We advise businesses, governments around the world. We do some boring stuff, which is measuring and certifying footprints, and some fun stuff, which is working with low-carbon technologies and solutions. I get to do the fun bit. We have about 160 people. Most of them are engineers. It's a mixture of scientists, consultants, project managers. We've expanded from the UK. We opened an office in Mexico last month, one in Beijing not too long before. We've got a presence on the ground in South Africa and also Brazil, and are active in other countries as well. And we actually audit each year how much costs we save for our customers. We have that audited by PwC, our auditors. And we can't audit and quantify revenue opportunities, but that's more my focus. And these are some examples of our customers, some of the big ICT companies, and we've also invested in various startups, and these are some of them. So what's the mobile industry been doing in energy and carbon? Quite a lot, actually. And on the positive note, most of the big mobile operators and big suppliers have targets to do with energy efficiency and carbon management. They vary a lot. It doesn't really matter that they vary a lot. So some of them are absolute targets. Some of them have different metrics, different time frames, but they've got targets. Some of them are a little bit made up, which is a bit unfortunate. They've had some PR department say, oh, we've got to have carbon targets, so they've made them up. And there's no way they'll ever achieve them, but they're a long way off, so that's fine. But most of the targets have been well thought through and are pretty good. The bad news is that the total energy consumption of the mobile industry is increasing. The latest figures available, sadly, are from 2011. I think because it was going up, it got stopped being measured. The risk is that it's going to increase a fair bit as data traffic increases. I guess some of the increase was just the growth in subscribers. But there is a risk that the energy consumption is going to increase and that regulators will be upset by that. Other good news is there's quite a lot of savings that mobile operators and the rest of the ecosystem can make in terms of energy consumption. The GSMA runs a benchmarking program that identifies quite a wide variation in performance, lots of cost opportunities. Lots of operators haven't yet implemented easy things, and when I talk to their CTOs, they say that's because they can't get any funding. But actually, if you look at other sectors like building industry, there's lots of creative ways to get funding for energy efficiency. And there are some entrepreneurs that have some pretty innovative solutions, not just the ones we've invested in, but other ones such as matching radio resources with traffic demand. And you can get lots of savings from doing things like that. The GSMA runs a benchmarking program, which is pretty good. They produce reports for operators, red if you're bad, green if you're good, and actually they quantify the cost savings you can make. And that's pretty impressive. Not many industries run programs like that. And there's some pretty neat startups. Digicel have been working with a startup, Israeli-based startup, nothing to do with the Carbon Trust, where they look at across pretty much any network. If you look across the network, the capacity is far, far greater than the actual traffic demand. By individual cell site, it often gets to 100%, but the whole network, it gets nowhere near. So Digicel has been working with sort of optimizing each base station, shutting down some when you can, where there's no impact on quality of service, and they cut their energy consumption by 23% just through software. No hardware, so whatever they spent on it was just negotiated with the startup company, but pretty impressive. Recycling, not such a good story. E-waste is a big issue. It's growing and becoming a bigger issue, much more so than many other industries. And lots of the materials in mobile phones can be recycled. 90% of them can be recycled, and it's potentially a resource scarcity issue with rare earths and so on. The latest stats I could find, 11% recycling rate from the US, slightly out of date, but it's not a good story. One really good story is all the M2M stuff, Internet of Things that we were talking about earlier. There's huge opportunities. The Smart 2020 report, I don't know whether any of you read it, the original one in 2008, Smarter 2020 that came out last year. The original one was a groundbreaking report, really brilliant report about how mobile, wireless and ICT in general can enable energy efficiency improvements in other industries. Absolutely brilliant. All the regulators loved it. The European Commission loved it, and it went through all the things that we heard much more detail about from Paul earlier. The tough news from that, well, Smart 2020 showed that actually the industry can enable over 5 times energy savings than it actually consumes itself. And Smarter 2020 actually revised those figures and said it's 7 times, which is brilliant. When you look at the mobile industry in more detail, the picture isn't quite so great. What's actually the savings being enabled were tiny in 2010 and are expected to be really tiny, relatively small next year. And looking at the detail behind Smart 2020, achieving these sort of enabled savings in 2020, you've got to believe this huge growth in M2M, which is happening much slower than forecast. And part of the challenge for the industry is the European Commission. I know when I talked to them, they loved all this stuff. They said, well, is it being measured? Is anyone tracking it? Smarter 2020 doesn't say, well, what happened since 5 years before when they launched the original report. It's all great forecasts, great potential, but actually it's not going to be achieved by 2020, which is dangerous from a sort of a regulatory management perspective. Summary of this part of the presentation. So several challenges. I think this growth in data risks causing problems with regulators because it's highly likely to drive up the energy consumption of the wireless mobile industry. Highly likely to. And that's going to cause regulatory challenges. And the logic that the mobile industry can reduce emissions in other industries is great, but it's very dangerous to put out forecasts and say we're going to enable 7 times savings in other industries if it's not going to be met. And those forecasts, I don't believe, will be met. And the recycling performance is weak. There's lessons that I'm sure can be learnt from FMCG industries, and so that can be fixed, but at some point that becomes more than just an image thing, it's a resource scarcity issue. And there's some opportunities. There's lots of cost savings that are out there that people can take if they're prepared to invest a little bit up front or do creative energy contracts. There's lots of new business opportunities. M2M is underexploited. We've been hearing it's going slowly. It's a massive opportunity there, but it's not really being grabbed sufficiently. And I think there is a risk of regulatory backlash. When I talk to the European Commission, they're always moaning about the ICT industry, and those moans are increasing. I don't know how serious it is, but they moan a lot.
Yeah, well, they do.
Yeah. They moan more about ICT than other industries. Some lessons from other industries. Just give some insights from some of the things that the Carbon Trust gets to see. I was going to run through 5 examples. One, some innovations around supply chain. Another one on product design. Another one on this enabling benefit that we've just been talking about. Coordinating across the whole industry, and also sort of joint industry R&D. Supply chain one, and I couldn't get permission in time for this company to say who it is, but it's a big global pharmaceutical company. They've done a clever thing on managing their supply chain by putting in a program. Their big concern wasn't to do with energy costs or sort of energy PR. they're worried that some of their key suppliers are not taking energy seriously, and it could cause a risk for them in the future that their energy costs will go up way too high, or in the extreme case, they'll go out of business. And this company is very dependent on a few key suppliers. So they wanted them to address those energy risks. And they've done it by putting in place as a platform to encourage their suppliers to share information, to help each other, to enable them to share procurement. You know, if they can get deals on some things, sharing it with their other suppliers to help each other. Helping this pharmaceutical company can sort of have a more less confrontational relationship with its suppliers. So trying to help them. Well, if you reduce your energy or energy-related risks, we'll provide you with sort of some contractual benefits. Trying to structure it as a win-win, and it's hugely beneficial. Whether mobile industry is obviously structured very differently. Whether this can apply to sort of more tier 2 suppliers, there may be an opportunity here. But it's not just in the pharmaceutical industry, as one of our banking clients is doing a similar thing with some of their suppliers as well. But I haven't seen anything like this in the mobile industry. Dyson, quite interestingly, one of the things they've done, they were best product designers on the planet, so we can't claim that much credit from helping them. But one of the things when they were designing their Airblade, you know, that hand dryer in the toilets where you put your hands in like that, they incorporated in their design software a sort of a low carbon function. So the designers, when they're playing around with things, they could see the immediate impact on not just how much energy it would consume, but the life cycle energy of the product that they were designing. And it was all instantaneous. They could change, all right, well, what happens if we change this design? They could immediately see the life cycle carbon impact. And it's brilliant. I mean, this Airblade has sort of taken over the hand dryer market by storm. Lots of people are trying to copy it. Whether incorporating design in sort of some of the mobile equipment manufacturers, getting to incorporate it so it's very easy for their designers to see things. Whether they can get the same sort of benefit that Dyson got out of this, don't know. But it's an idea and an opportunity. BT, the way they manage this enabling side of things, is far more sophisticated than any of the mobile operators. Some of the mobile operators like Vodafone, O2, Swisscom, they've got programs where actually they look at the enabling benefit and they try and quantify it. BT is just light years ahead, which is strange for a big clunky organisation. They've set targets where they're going to enable 3 times their own emissions or embedded energy by the end of 2020. They measure everything in extreme detail. They quantify everything. Everything is public, so you can challenge their assumptions. The program was launched by their CEO. He knew about it. He knew about it enough to talk without notes when he launched it. It's a very impressive program, and it's not just about them trying to save the planet and get a green brand. It's them trying to help their marketing and their salespeople to have an additional tool when they're out selling their kit. It's a very impressive program. Aluminium industry. The aluminium industry is one of the worst polluters on the planet. Aluminium is like solid electricity. 1 ton of aluminium is responsible for 10 tons of CO2. They have managed their PR brilliantly. You never hear the European Commission complain about the aluminium industry. It's all kick the ICT industry. They've got a very complex footprint. It's not really easy to understand. They've got a big recycling issue. But they, through the Industry Association, back 15 years or 1998, they all got together and said, this is going to be a problem for us. We're solid electricity. What are we going to do? So they set up programs to manage their energy efficiency as an industry. They all collaborate and try and help each other on lessons learned. They sorted out recycling. And they came up with this enabling benefit. Hey, we're light. We're lighter than steel. We can say we're saving the planet. And they've marketed themselves brilliantly. They've got a positive perception amongst consumers and, most importantly, regulators. The regulators love them, but it's not a green product at all. Whether there's a lesson for the telecoms in the mobile industry, maybe. I think the big risk in the energy side is the regulatory risk. Energy is not a big deal for mobile industry typically, except for some of the emerging markets where it can be, energy costs can be 10% of revenue in places like Bangladesh and Pakistan. But in the developed world, it's not a big issue. But the regulatory risk is. The aviation industry also just tried to argue, we're so important for the economy, you just leave us alone. Well, the European Commission hasn't. They've regulated them, they've included them in the emission trading scheme, they've got stuffed. Managing the mobile industry and the ICT industry, like the aluminium industry, will be much more sensible. The other example I wanted to give was on collaborative R&D. This is one example. It's actually from offshore wind, where offshore wind is too expensive. They've got problems with making things cheap enough. So the 9 largest developers that account for 80% of the offshore wind market all got together and said, how do we make bits of it cheaper? We don't want to own the technology that makes foundations or own the technology for ships that go out and do the maintenance. How do we make it all cheaper? So they've all got together, they pool their R&D, they got a bit of extra money from the government to top it up. So each of them puts in £1, the government puts in £4.50. It's a big program and they all combine their R&D. Why doesn't the mobile industry do that in some instances where you don't have to own the technologies, but from an energy point of view, you can get things cheaper. I've tried to help some startups where getting fuel cells in mobile base stations, or no mobile operator wants to own that technology, but actually trying to negotiate a trial, God, that's hard enough. And then you get a trial with an operator, yippee. They run that trial for a year in one site. Then if that goes well, they might roll it out and they might try it in 5 or 6 sites. And then they might roll it out and it all takes forever. And then you can't use those results really to go take it to another operator. They just want to start from scratch. Yeah. If you all pull together, it becomes easy. So, this competition has run, this group have run competitions. They run a competition for foundations. How are we going to make that cheaper? Run a competition. They got over 100 applications. They pick the best ones and then they run trials as a group. Brilliant. So the conclusions from this, I see regulatory risk as the biggest challenge. It's not sort of energy per se, but regulatory risk in the developed markets, energy per se in the developing markets. Energy cost savings are available. There's stuff that can be done there if it's an issue. And I think there's an opportunity to enhance supplier relationships and also big opportunity in M2M, as we've heard. Possible actions. How do you get this on the CEO's agenda? Well, the regulatory risk might. BT got it on the agenda just from a business perspective. How do we sell more? Well, we can use energy as a way of selling more. And I think learning from other industries, there are some things going on in other industries that mobile can learn from. Thank you.